Hello, in this podcast, we're going to be learning about the levels of organization and cell theory. And by the end of this podcast, you should be able to list the levels of organization and also know the elements of cell theory. And since we just finished the ecology unit, we're going to be going from large to small in the levels of organization. And the largest level is the biosphere. And the biosphere is the whole Earth. And this you see here in what probably is the only picture where you can see the entire Earth that was actually taken by a person. This was taken by one of the Apollo astronauts on Apollo 17. And when you go below that, then we come to the level called the biome. And the biome is a large region that is similar in climate, geology, and it's named after the dominant ecosystem. Okay, this first biome that we're looking at, and we're by no means looking at all the biomes, is looking at tropical rainforest. And tropical rainforest is one of the larger ones. And here you see a picture of tropical rainforest, and it is the most biodiverse biome that we have, and it covers a huge area. This whole area that you see here is all tropical rainforest, as is all of this. Next one we're looking at it, and now we've gone from South America to New York. This is upstate New York, and this is deciduous forest. And this is what we basically find around here. In deciduous forest, the dominant plant that we find would be a forest that is made of trees that lose their leaves in the winter, deciduous trees. And one thing that sort of distinguishes this from the tropical rainforest, besides it being much, much less biodiverse, is that at least in the Northeast, it's the Northeast United States, the deciduous forests are growing. Now we're going to go up to Alaska to look at another biome quickly. Here we are in Alaska, looking at another biome, and this biome is tundra. And the thing which distinguishes tundra from many other biomes is that if you just go a few inches below the surface of the soil, the ground is frozen all year long. And for that reason, you won't find many trees in this area here. You won't find any at all. Other parts of tundra, you will find little stumpy trees. And you have to be careful building your house in the tundra because the heat will melt the ground, and that will cause your house to start sinking into the ground. Now we're going off to Africa to see the last biome that we're sampling, and this one here is quite different from what we've seen before. Okay. This biome here is the savanna. It's at basically the same latitude that we saw at the tropical rainforest, so you get the same temperature range basically. However, the amount of rainfall is profoundly less, so you don't get anywhere near the number of trees, and there's really only enough rainfall to support trees around where there's a body of water like a river. Moving down from the biome, we now come to ecosystem, and this you may start recognizing some things from our ecology unit. And an ecosystem is a group of organisms living in the same area that are interacting with the abiotic factors. Below that, we just take one part of the ecosystem. We take the abiotic out, and we get the community, where we see all the species in an ecosystem. And the ecosystem that we see here in this picture is one that we find quite a bit of around our school. And this is a saltwater marsh, which actually was the ecosystem before they drained the marsh where our school is. And plenty of organisms here, and here we see net casting to look at some organisms that are in the water. And if you see some white dots out in the distance, those are great egrets, which are waiting in the swamp looking for food, and there are plenty of insects there, and lots. You see some trees, and there's grass that is specially adapted to growing in the salt water. Below the community, we come to population, and those are all the organisms of one species in an area. And you may remember this lab that we did earlier, where we basically were looking at 4 different populations of weeds that was growing in our school's front yard. And the smallest that we get to in terms of ecology would be organism, and that is a living thing. And here actually we see 2 different kinds of living things. We see a bluebird and we see a tree. Looks like it's a spruce tree, I believe. Now we come to below the level of an organism, and we've transitioned beyond ecology. And an organ system is a group of organs that work together to perform the same function. And what we see pictured here is the circulatory system, which has many different parts of it. We have our arteries, veins, and the capillaries, which are too small to see here. And of course, you've got the heart. And there are other systems, like I've listed here, the digestive system and the nervous system, and there are other ones too that I don't have listed. Below that, we have organs, and the organ systems are made of organs. And one that's found in the circulatory system that we saw before is the heart. And here you see 2 diagrams of the heart, and you see it opened up so you can see the chambers that are used to both collect and pump the blood throughout the body. Other examples you see here are we've got the stomach, skin, which is our largest organ, and the liver, which is also one of the largest. Below that, we come to tissue. And the tissue is a group of cells that perform the same function, and each organ is composed of many tissues, just like an organ system is composed of many organs. And examples of that in our body is we have cardiac tissue, which is what makes up the heart, epidermis, which is the outer layer of our skin, and connective tissue, that's tissue that basically holds our organs in place. There's some organisms like jellyfish and coral that have tissues but no organs. Then we come to the cell. And the cell is the basic unit of life. It's the building block of life in that tissues are composed of cells. And once you go below the level of the cell, which we will be doing in this unit, looking at organelles which make up the cell, and those things are not alive. And so we are all made of cells, and what you see on the left is a mouse cell, and what you see on the right is a unicellular organism, and there are, and for the majority of the history of life, for about 4 billion years, we had all life was just single cellular. Now we come to cell theory, since we've gone through all the levels of organization. And there are 3 elements of cell theory. And the first is the cell is the basic unit of life, and how that was just shown before. If you don't remember, then just hit the rewind. Also, all organisms are made of cells. It could be a singular cellular organism like an amoeba, or it could be one composed of many cells like you. And the last one is that all cells come from pre-existing cells, and like all the cells, like all of our cells, came from one cell, and that cell came from the fertilization of your dad's sperm and your mother's egg, and those originally came from the sperm and egg that made your parents, and so on, going all the way back to the beginning of life. Last part of this, we're looking at exceptions to cell theory, because and in every theory, or every time we try to categorize things, there'll always be exceptions to it, because you don't find in life, you'll find there really isn't any clear dividing lines. There's always some bit of murkiness in between, because our categories are actually artificial. First exception is the virus, and this is probably the more common one that you see questioned on the Regents exam. They are an exception because they are not made of cells, and many scientists don't really consider them to be alive. We're going to see in the lesson coming up that we do in class and not have as a vodcast what the characteristics of life are, and the virus does not meet all of those characteristics. So some say that they're not actually alive. And one reason is that in order to act like they are alive, in order to be active, they need to basically infect and take over a cell, and the cell will do the things for the virus, like it will make the new parts of the parts of the new viruses that will then go out and infect other organisms or other cells in an organism. The next exception would be two parts of cells. One is found in us, and another is found in and both of them are actually found in plants: mitochondria and chloroplast. And for both of them, several billion years ago, back when everything was single-celled, their ancestors were single-celled organisms, and they entered into a mutualistic relationship with another species, and they actually went inside of it, and eventually both of the cells became dependent on each other, and the mitochondria and the chloroplast can no longer exist outside of the cell, and they don't perform all of the characteristics of life. So they have some things that cells do, like they have their own DNA. All of the mitochondria have come from previous mitochondria. All chloroplasts came from previous chloroplasts. But so they perform some of the life functions, but not all of them. Now, here are the concluding questions for the vodcast. And first, I want you to list the levels of organization from the smallest to the largest. And second one, what are the three elements of cell theory? And three, why are viruses, it should be N, not and, why are viruses an exception to cell theory? And this concludes this lesson. So I'll see you tomorrow in class with your answers to these concluding questions.